2018, I lost everything. And one day I had a beautiful house, I had a beautiful car, I had a beautiful job, I had my kids, I had my life, and it was gone. All of it.
The story of a prison mom begins long before she's behind bars, sometimes generations before. In childhood, she often faces abuse, neglect, addictions, domestic violence, and it's typical that at least one family member is in prison.
But typical is not how Lyndie describes her path to prison. She's decided to reveal her unexpected prison story in her own words. Welcome to Prison Moms Set Free. The stories of moms in prison will shock you, will surprise you, and I hope will inspire you. And today I'm thrilled to bring you the story of Lyndie. Welcome, Lyndie.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here and share my story.
Yes, I'm glad you are here too.
Yeah.
All right, so let's set up the contrast. Tell us about your life just before you were literally kind of in chains going to prison.
So I don't think that I had the typical route to prison that a lot of ladies unfortunately had. I had a beautiful life, a great family. No one in my family has ever been to jail. No one does drugs. No one smokes. No one drinks. I have a very professional family, from doctors and lawyers and finance, and everyone's very successful. We follow God. I grew up in the church. My grandfather's a pastor. My parents met at a church camp. My mom was a Sunday school teacher. I went to university at the University of Hawaii, got my bachelor's in international business management, went on to get my master's degree in organizational leadership, became one of the youngest and one of the only female vice presidents for one of the largest software companies in the world, got married, went through IVF, had 2 beautiful babies, lived in a beautiful home on a golf course in a country club, drove a nice car, had nice vacations. And then things turned. Sometimes they do. I had a very horrible divorce.
What prompted it?
He became an alcoholic, and I was working to support the family. I was mom. I was the house cleaner and the cooker and the errand runner and the childcare. I was taking the kids to school back and forth and paying the bills and traveling for work and managing this corporation. And he was doing nothing but drinking all night and sleeping all day. And I asked for a divorce.
So he didn't have a job?
He didn't have a job. He, I'd say, quote unquote, worked for his dad, which basically meant his dad gave him some money every now and then and paid for a car. He totaled 3 cars, which I bought him new cars. And he just was he was becoming a person that was toxic for me to have around my children. And so I asked for divorce, went on a business trip, and was blindsided that he hired a lawyer and filed divorce, and completely blindsided me. So I felt betrayed.
So you had just asked for a divorce, but hadn't hired anybody.
Right. I wanted to do things amicably. I said, look, even though none of this is yours, I agree to split it 50-50. I don't want the kids going through this long, drawn out process of divorce and custody battle. I'll give you half. We'll split the kids 50-50. He agreed. And then I was blindsided. And during the first hearing, they froze all my assets. So I wasn't able to hire an attorney. So I had to start representing myself. And as things went on, I realized I knew nothing about the law. I knew nothing about how to represent myself. And he had deep pockets from his family and was able to hire these law firms. And so as things went on, I realized that I was losing control. All of the things that I had worked for in my life and built up were in jeopardy. My kids were confused. They were staying at family members' houses and they were being kind of shuffled around. And I started drinking. And when the divorce culminated in 2018, I lost everything. And one day I had a beautiful house, I had a beautiful car, I had a beautiful job, I had my kids, I had my life, and it was gone. All of it. They awarded him the house, the car, the kids, my 401k, my savings. I went from all of it to being homeless, jobless, without my kids, and without a dollar to my name.
Why were they able to win? Did they prove, had you been drinking at that point? They proved a history of drink. Like, how could they possibly win?
His family saw me as a money tree. So I was paying for his aunt's mortgage. I was paying for his mom's car, his sister's cell phone bill. I was, supported him. And so it was nothing for them to get up on stand and lie. And because I traveled for work a lot, they said he was a stay-at-home dad and he was really a stay-at-home drunk. With courts, sometimes unfortunately things don't go fairly. And
do you see a problem with that? Do you see that sometimes, not always, women get the short end of the stick in a situation like that?
Yes, because I didn't have anyone to defend myself. I was still a believer that justice would prevail. I believed that the system would work and that the judge would see that these people were lying, because the conversation on his end was money, 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 money. And mine was protect the kids, protect the kids. And because he had these big name lawyers and he had all of his family members there to testify against me, saying that I was sort of absentee because I traveled for work, or I worked long hours even when I was working at home, that he was a better fit and he deserved all the money and he was awarded to it. And I didn't know how to defend myself. My assets were frozen and I was left as a pro se person sitting there all alone trying to defend myself. And so
what was that day like where you lost everything?
I didn't know what to do. I had nothing. Everything that I had worked for my entire life was gone. It was gone. And I walked into the parking lot of the courthouse and I booked a flight to Mexico. And I got on the first flight. I went home, packed a suitcase, drove to the airport, and I went to Mexico. And I sat in a resort for about 3 days. And I was like, I probably should tell somebody I'm here. So I called my mom, and my mom was like, why does your number look weird? And I was like, well, I'm in Mexico. And she's like, how long have you been there? And I was like, about 3 days. She's like, when are you coming home? And I'm like, I don't know. I just need to just sit. I just went to a resort and I sat on the beach.
How did you have money to do that?
They allowed me to keep, of all of the hundreds of thousands, he was able to take almost $1 million from me. And they allowed me to keep 26,000 of that. And so I went to Mexico. Because I traveled for work a lot, I had points. So I was able to pay for my flight and my hotel with the points. And so I stayed there for a few days.
Did you drink?
Like
to ease your pain? Did you drink while you were there?
Not really. I really just kind of wanted to decompress. But I came back and I realized that I was staying with a friend. I was homeless. I was jobless. I was penniless. And I started drinking and drinking and drinking and drinking and drinking. And I didn't know how to cope. And it exasperated the situation. I wasn't able to function. All I wanted to do is forget. I just wanted to forget. And it just snowballed. I ended up getting a couple of DUIs, and I got lucky. They gave me treatment for those. I didn't spend any jail time for those, and got treatment and thought everything was good for a few years, and was getting right back on track. And then he came back and filed another court case and wanted more money from me and wanted full custody, and it just triggered all of it again. And I couldn't get out of the cycle of drinking and self-destruction, and I just sort of self-sabotaged. And I couldn't get myself out of that dark place. I couldn't understand how I did everything right in life. I worked for a nonprofit. I was very involved in my church. I took care of my family. I took care of, I adopted my nephew when my sister passed away. I was taking care of him. I was taking care of my ex-husband's family. I was doing everything I thought was the right thing to do. And I just couldn't wrap my head around it. And so I self-sabotaged. I, I just, I drowned myself in a bottle. And
Let me ask you a question about the pressure of that time. So you'd been, a top tier executive. You had a beautiful home on a golf course. You had the perfect life. I've seen your pictures of you with your kids in front of the fireplace. Everything looked perfect from the outside. But then you were losing things, and it sounds like you got another job, and he wanted money from that job.
yeah,
But in the midst of that, you lost your sister and you adopted your nephew. That must have added to the trauma.
it did. She died in 2016. And so I had been taking care of my nephew on and off for most of his life. But when she passed, she did sign over the rights, parental rights to me. And so,
Do you mind if I ask what happened?
she was a all-star soccer player. She played on the Americas League. She played her entire life. It was her passion. And at the end of high school, she got an injury, and they prescribed her. And this was at the time when they did OxyContin. And I remember picking up a prescription for her, and they had given her like 100 Oxycontins at the highest, I don't know the dosage, the highest dosage of Oxycontin. And I said, Leslie, what do you need this for? And she said, well, I'll just sell it if I don't need it. Well, her life snowballed, because then she got addicted. She never went to anything like heroin or anything like that, but she started mixing the pills with alcohol, and her body just couldn't handle it, and her organs started shutting down. She eventually went to assisted living, and then hospice, and then passed away.
What happened, Lyndie? Like, you grew up on, at least from the outside in, a church-going, professional, successful, loving family. And then 2 daughters in that family went through devastation. What do you think happened? Was it too perfect? Was it superficial? What happened?
I don't know. My parents got divorced when I was 7. She was 5. We were pretty young. It didn't affect me, because I maintained a great relationship, and my sister really attached herself to my mom and kind of felt abandoned from my dad, even though that wasn't the case. I think maybe that carried over into her addiction.
So I took you off track. Let's go back to, you've gotten DUIs. You didn't have to go to jail, thankfully. You just got treatment. You felt like you were getting back on track. But then your sister died. You adopted your nephew. Your husband was coming back at you for more money. Where do we go from there?
I just couldn't get out of it. Every time I thought that I would get my life back on track, I, would get back into my professional career, then it was almost like he wanted a piece of the pie, and he would come back at me, and we'd be back in court, and he knew that. And I made the mistake of saying I can always make more money, but I can never get more time with my kids. And he took that and ran with it. And so he knew that he was able to lie in court once and twice and 3 times. And so it became this constant battle. We were in court every 6 months, and I was just internalizing it. And my kids are always the most important thing to me. They're my life or death. I went through 4 rounds of IVF to have them. I was told that I had 0% chance of having children, and they're my miracle babies. I spent every dollar I had, every ounce of everything. I gave everything just to have a chance at having those babies. And so not only are they my miracle babies, they're my whole life. And for them to be ripped from me was just more than I could bear. And so I drowned everything in that alcohol. And it has been that cycle for the last few years where I start to get back on track and then something derails me around the kids, and I get depressed and I go back to what I knew, just the thing that would make me forget. And then I got this last DUI. It was on Mother's Day. We had 50-50 custody, and we agreed he gets them on Father's Day, I get them on Mother's Day, but he wanted them to spend brunch in the morning with the kiddos and their cousins, and I agreed to it. And I said, that's fine, just bring them over in the afternoon. We have, dinner plans, and then I'll bring them to school in the morning. And so I allowed him to have brunch, and then brunch turned into lunch, and then there was excuses. Oh, they're having fun with their cousins. You're not going to take them away from their cousins, right? And then all of a sudden the phone is shut off, and it's in the afternoon, and I have no communication. I don't know where my kids are. And so I went out with some girlfriends and we had some mimosas. I drove home. I wasn't, belligerent or anything like that. I had to go to work the next morning. So, but I decided that I wanted to stop off at the liquor store and get another bottle of wine and just sit at home in a bath and light some candles and have a glass of wine. And coming out of the parking lot, I got pulled over, and that was the DUI that sent me to prison.
Because it was
my fourth one. So the first one, I was young. It was a DWA. I blew below the legal limit. So, but in Colorado, it still counts. And then I got the 2 during my divorce, and then the fourth one is, of course, the one that they sent me to prison for.
I want to touch on 2 things before we end this first part. Clearly you were victimized in some ways, but clearly you also know you made a bad choice to turn to alcohol.
Yeah.
What did that feel like, to have that empty, horrible loss and not getting to have control of being with your babies as they grew up as nearly as much as you had pictured or wanted? And then you thought, if I just have a little more, it'll just erase it. I won't have to think about it. I won't have to feel this bad. I won't have to feel this empty and dark. Describe that.
I don't know that there's words to describe the emptiness that you feel when you are without your kids. There's nothing that, there's nothing that can fill that void. And I had a lot of, I don't know if it's self-loathing, but regret, and just, if I did something different, if I just could have just seen this coming, if I would have just prepared better, if I would have just, all those things that go through your head, and then to try to fill that void, that emptiness in my heart and my life. I didn't know what else to do, and good or bad, it's the decision that I made. It had devastating consequences. It wasn't the right choice, but it was what I had available. I knew that if I could have some glasses of wine and just go to sleep, that I could just
shut it off.
And it became once in a while to every day. And it worked for a while until it didn't. And the consequences of my actions were completely devastating. I made the choice to do those things. I could have sought out different ways of help, but I felt alone, hopeless. I felt empty. I felt violated. I felt like I did so much to try to do everything for everybody else. And then when it came time for those people to do the right thing for me, I was abandoned, and I was just alone. I didn't go to bars. I didn't go out. I didn't party. I sat at home alone and just cried and, just missed my babies.
Okay, so last question. So there you are, a professional woman who's made millions of dollars, who's lost custody at least partially of your children, who's now labeled as a drunk because you have 4 DUIs.
Yep.
You walk into a prison as a professional woman with a master's degree. What did you think when you first walked in to see the other ladies in yellow and green? Like, what did you think? The answer in part 2 of Prison Moms Set Free, Lyndie's story. Tune in to find out.